The poisoned cup had done the impossible. It forced the king of the universe to give back every child he had swallowed. But a cup cannot make a tyrant surrender a throne. And Cronus, lord of the Titans, did not kneel. Even reeling, even unmasked, he was still the mightiest being alive. This is the story of how Zeus took the rest. Remember how it had come to this. The grown Zeus, disguised as a servant, carried a drugged cup into his father's hall and watched the king drink it down. The tyrant convulsed upon his throne. Up came the stone he had swallowed in Zeus's place, and then, one by one and alive, the 5 children he had devoured. Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, full-grown, unharmed, and burning with the memory of a lifetime sealed in the dark. The living tomb had been opened at last. Now they stood in the cold marble hall, 6 gods where the king had counted none, the secret heir and his freed kin, facing the father who had eaten them. For a heartbeat, it felt like victory. 5 immortals breathed open air for the first time, and the king of the Titans stared at the son he thought he had destroyed. But Zeus knew better than to mistake a freed family for a won war. His father had given up his children. He had not given up his crown. Cronus rose to his full towering height, the shock hardening back into fury. He had ruled since the fall of the sky, and he would not be unseated by a cupbearer's trick. And the very air seemed to gather, for the king was not alone. Behind Cronus stood the Titans, the ancient mountainous powers who had ruled all things since the beginning. 6 young gods, against the oldest and strongest beings the universe had ever made. The cup had freed an army, but an army is not yet a victory. Let us look at the 6 who now stood together. Swallowed as helpless newborns, they emerged as grown gods, each carrying a power the world had never seen unleashed. There was Poseidon, broad and storm-tempered, the restless sea given a body. His fury rolled like surf, and the marble seemed to tremble when he moved. There was Hades, tall and silent and grave, the eldest brother by the order of swallowing, already at ease in shadow, watching everything and saying almost nothing. There was Hera, sovereign even in exile, her chin lifted like a queen's, and Demeter, golden and grave, and gentle Hestia, the firstborn, the first swallowed and the last set free. They had shared a darkness no one else could imagine, years sealed living inside their father. That shared grave had welded them into something stronger than a family. It had made them allies. And they turned every one of them to the youngest, the brother who had not been swallowed, to Zeus, who walked into the lion's hall and carried them all back into the light. He was their liberator, and so their leader. The 6 made a pact in that cold hall. They would not scatter and hide. They would take the throne of the cosmos together. But to do that, they had to leave. For the hall belonged to Cronus, and the king had found his voice again, a summons that shook the foundations of the world. Across the cosmos, the Titans answered. Oceanus, who circled the world in water, Hyperion of the burning sky, Iapetus, Koios, and Krios, vast elder powers, each a mountain that could think. They gathered upon Mount Othrys, the great southern peak, and made it a fortress of stone and storm. The old order was closing ranks, and its weight was almost beyond imagining. So the young gods claimed a mountain of their own. To the north rose Olympus, where the 6 planted their defiance like a flag, small against the Titans, but bright and rising. And the cosmos held its breath. For the first time since the world began, it had split clean in 2. Titans on one peak, Olympians on the other, war waiting in the gap between. And looking south at that wall of ancient strength, Zeus understood the terrible truth. Cunning had freed his family, but no trick, no clever cup could win an open war against the Titans. In open battle, 6 young gods would be crushed like grain beneath a stone. Courage was not enough. Wit was not enough. To win, Zeus needed power he did not yet have. And so he sought the oldest wisdom in creation. Not a god or a titan, but deeper, the living ground itself, Gaia, the earth, the mother of them all. She had been there before the titans, before the sky, before anything had a name. She had watched her husband Uranus rise and fall, and her son Cronus do the same. Zeus knelt on the green hills and asked the earth his impossible question. How can a handful of children overthrow the rulers of everything? And the earth answered from the deep stone. You will never win, she told him, by the strength of 6. The throne does not fall to the strong. It falls to the one who frees what the frightened have chained. And then Gaia told her grandson a secret older than Cronus, one buried so deep that even the titans tried to forget it. A secret with a sound, the clank of chains in the dark. Long ago, she said, she had borne other children before the titans, monstrous children, magnificent children, powers so vast their own fathers could not bear to look at them. First, the 3 Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes and Arges, giants with a single burning eye, and hands that could forge anything the mind could dream, the greatest smiths that would ever live. And then the 300 handers, each with 50 heads and 100 arms, the strongest beings ever born, creatures who could tear mountains loose and hurl them like stones. Their father Uranus had feared them and buried them, and when Cronus seized the throne, he did not free his monstrous brothers. He left them chained in the dark. And where was that dark? Not the land of the dead, deeper, Tartarus, the pit beneath the world, so far below that a falling anvil would drop 9 days before it struck bottom. Free them, the earth whispered, and they will arm you. Free them, and you will not face the titans as 6, but with the very powers the titans were too afraid to keep. To win his war, Zeus would first have to leave the bright world and descend, alive, into the deepest prison in creation, the place the cosmos buried what it dared not destroy. He did not go alone. Poseidon came, his sea fury banked into purpose, and Hades, the gray brother who walked easiest of all in the dark, 3 sons of Cronus going down past the roots of the mountains, past the springs of the sea, through a gloom that swallowed every star until the last light above guttered out behind them. Tartarus was ringed with a wall of bronze and a throat of solid night. The air was cold and old and heavy. Somewhere in the dark, chains the size of rivers groaned. And something guarded that place. Cronus had not left his buried brothers unwatched. Over the prison he had set a monster, Kampe, a vast coiling she-dragon, jailer of the deep. She rose to meet them, serpent coils churning the dark, a girdle of snapping beast heads at her waist, a scorpion sting curved above. She was the last lock on the tyrant's buried fear. And here the cupbearer's son became something new. Zeus did not trick Kampe, nor slip past her in disguise. He faced the monster in the dark and struck her down with his own hands. The jailer fell. Her coils went still, and the way to the prison lay open. The deepest dungeon in the universe had lost its keeper, and Zeus walked in to free the prisoners. He found them first, the Cyclopes, huge and hunched in the gloom, their single eyes blinking at the first light in uncounted ages, hardly daring to believe in rescue. He struck the chains from their wrists, and these giants who could have crushed him effortlessly wept like freed prisoners and asked the young god how they could ever repay him. Then he came to the 100 handers, Cottus, Briarios, and Guys, mountains of grasping arms and watching heads, the strongest things alive, raging since before the Titans were kings. Zeus broke their bonds as well, and the most terrible beings in creation knelt to the god who freed them and pledged their 100 hands to his cause. The buried army of the cosmos was loose. Now here's the thing. Almost everyone gets wrong about Zeus. We picture him born with lightning in his fist. The Thunderbolt is by birthright. It was not yet. The most famous weapon in all of mythology did not exist until this moment. And it would be made not by Zeus, but for him by the grateful smiths he had just set free. The Cyclopes asked how they could repay their freedom and answered it themselves. They would give the young god the one thing only they could make, a weapon worthy of a king of the sky. They lit a forge at the heart of the world, a fire hotter than any that had burned, and the three master smiths set to work as no makers ever had. Into that fire they poured the raw stuff of the storm. They hammered thunder on the anvil until it rang. They folded lightning into metal and forged the sky's own crack into a single blazing shard. And when it was done, they placed it in Zeus's hands. The Thunderbolt, lightning given a handle. The power to split mountains and shatter armies, born from a debt of gratitude. He closed his fingers around it, and weapon and god seemed to know each other. The crackle that had always flickered at his skin now had somewhere to go. This is what he was born for. But the Cyclopes were not finished, for 3 brothers had gone down together, and the smiths had a gift for each. To Hades they gave a helm of darkness, a cap of pure shadow that swallowed its wearer from sight, so the grave brother could pass through any battle unseen. And to Poseidon they gave the trident, a 3-pronged spear that could crack the earth, shake the roots of mountains, and call the whole sea up in a towering wall of water. 3 brothers, 3 weapons, the sky, the shadow, and the sea, each made flesh in a single instrument of power, the 3 great symbols of the gods forged in one fire in the dark. Remember this when you next see Zeus hurling his lightning. That bolt was not his by right of birth. It was given to him by the monsters his father feared, and he chose to free. And there is the secret of his power. Cronus ruled by burying what he feared. Zeus rose by freeing it. The tyrant made jailers of himself. The air made allies of the chained. They came up out of the dark transformed. 6 fugitive gods had gone down to survive. They came back an army, armed with the lightning of the sky and the monsters of the deep. Behind Zeus now marched the Cyclopes and the 100-handers, the strongest beings in creation. In his hand burned the Thunderbolt. The disguise was gone. The cupbearer had become a king at war. On Olympus, the Olympians arrayed themselves bright and terrible, and across the divided sky on Othrys, the Titans gathered their ancient might, mountain against mountain, power against power. And the king who had never once fought for his crown understood at last what was coming. He had taken the cosmos by ambush, held it by terror, and never had to defend it, until now. The cup had forced him to surrender his children. Now an armed enemy would force him to surrender what he never imagined losing, his peace and the safety of an age that answered to no one. Whatever happened in the war to come, one thing was already finished. The age of the unchallenged tyrant was over. The Titan King would never again sit easy upon his throne. Think on how it was done, not by the strength of the strongest, but by the one brave enough to go down into the dark for others. Zeus rose by freeing what his father had buried. That is the deep law the succession myth keeps teaching. Power hoarded becomes a chain. Power shared becomes a thunderbolt. The fearful king digs his own prison. The open hand inherits the world. 2 mountains faced each other across a darkening sky. On one, the old gods of a fading age. On the other, the young gods of an age beginning, and nothing now could keep them apart. Zeus lifted the thunderbolt, and far off the first clouds of the greatest war the cosmos would ever know began to gather. 10 years of it lay ahead. The Titanomachy was about to begin. The cup had emptied the tyrant. The dark had armed the air. And now, with lightning in his hand and monsters at his back, the secret son would come for the throne by war. Thank you for watching. If this tale stayed with you, subscribe. A new myth arrives every week, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Until then, may the old stories keep their hold on you.